Uh, Thank you, Andy. Welcome everyone online attendees to the second day of TEMSCON 2020. This is the editorial panel, and I'm very proud to have the editors-in-chief of top journals in engineering and technology management. I've never seen so many editors together in an editorial panel before. It's really a great opportunity. And thank you, editors, for making time. I know for some of you it's really late or it's really early, but you're all here. Thank you so much. So we're gonna go through the journals one by one in an alphabetic order, and everybody will introduce their journal and what messages they want to give. And then afterwards, we're gonna be open to questions, and we're gonna take questions from the audience. So without further ado, I'll start with Decision Sciences Journal and Professor Talluri, please. And before that, Professor Talluri is also has been a long-time department editor with our transactions. Go ahead, Sri.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm faculty in the Department of Supply Chain Management at Michigan State University. I've been here for about 20 years now. And, as Turgal mentioned, I work closely with IEEE transactions and the department there for models and methodologies. And I also work very closely with Decision Sciences Journal. Specifically, I'm the department editor there for analytical models and supply chain management. And Decision Sciences is a long-established journal, and the institute just completed its 50th year last year. And the focus of DSJ is that it publishes papers that are anchored in business problems. So that is the most important thing. So we are trying to target a paper to the journal. The most important thing is in terms of whether a decision maker actually faces this kind of a problem, and what are some of the solution methods that you can possibly implement to solve those types of problems. With that being said, the journal is mainly anchored in information systems and supply chains. Of course, supply chain is a major component, but DSI also has a huge IT group. So it's at the intersection of those two, but of course, interface with other functional areas. So we do entertain papers in the domain of marketing or accounting and management, but with the core areas being again, supply chain and IS. And as I said, the decision-making aspect is the most critical thing. And the papers that are published, there's emphasis on theory and managerial aspects. So of course, if you're not building theory or testing theory, it's not going to basically fly. But at the same time, in terms of the impact on practice, that's a very important part of the papers that are published in this journal. And with respect to methodologies, we are quite open. Okay, we take empirical, math modeling, experimental stuff, case studies, simulations, whatnot. So a variety of methodologies are basically entertained. And the acceptance rate is about 7 to 8%. So it's a very selective journal, and we try to maintain the quality. Again, there are about 8 to 10 departments, and the structure is that of course, there are two co-editors, and then there are about 8 to 10, department editors, and then there are a bunch of AEs, and the reviewer pool, of course. Okay, so that's how the journal is, basically structured. And we can get into other details with respect to, potential authors trying to target the journal. I'll talk about some of the important aspects to keep in mind to be able to be successful in taking a paper here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sri. All right, so we're going to the next journal. Joe, I'm sorry, Ed Paul, Engineering Management Journal.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and share. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. My name is Ed Pohl. I'm one of the editors-in-chief of the Engineering Management Journal. My other editor-in-chief is Brian Smith. Brian's at Mississippi State University. I'm in the Industrial Engineering Department at the University of Arkansas. I've been the editor-in-chief for just about 2.5 years now. Brian joined me in January as the co-editor-in-chief. So the Engineering Management Journal is sponsored by the American Society for Engineering Management. So it's a quarterly journal that's published by ASEM, and it started back in 1998. Currently, we're about to publish volume 32, issue 3. Each issue typically has between 5 and 7 articles. In 2015, ASEM entered into a partnership with Taylor and Francis, and that's really enhanced the quality and the visibility of the journal. Prior to that, we were self-publishing as a society. Our editorial structure, we have 2 editors-in-chief, 1 managing editor. We have an editorial board of about 35 associate editors and 2 cooperating society editors, including 9 of which are outside the United States. We have over 200 active reviewers, including about half which are outside the United States. So the editorial aims of the journal are to provide practical and pertinent knowledge on the management of technology, technical professionals, and technical organizations. We want to be able to provide value to engineering managers and improve the practice of engineering management. So these editorial aims have implications on the target audience for every article. We want articles, especially research articles, to contribute to the body of knowledge. And the focus there is the engineering management researchers. But we also want to contribute to the practice of engineering management. And we're targeting practice-oriented articles that would be of benefit to engineering management practitioners. This makes us a little bit unique compared to other journals in this area, we believe. We accept both research and applied engineering management manuscripts. Usually within each issue, we try and have 1 applied engineering management manuscript. All types of research methods are welcome for research-oriented articles, everything from lit reviews, case studies, simulation and modeling, structured surveys, conceptual frameworks, etc. As far as the audience, since joining Taylor and Francis, our access increased immensely. You can see back in 2015, the number of institutions with subscriptions and access to our journal was very small relative to where it is today. And you can see the impact that's had on the number of downloads of articles. So the number of downloads is increased significantly. It's up 45% higher than the previous year. And this year we're 27% higher than the same period in 2019. And the articles are downloaded from an audience from around the world, with the largest component being from Europe. We have almost 36 countries represented in our author pool for the last couple of years. So we are an international journal. And this just gives you some insight. The number of submissions continues to increase. Where we can see for this year, we're ahead of where we were at this time last year. And the average speed to publication online from time of acceptance has decreased significantly. We're now down on the order of 30 days from the time of acceptance of an article before it appears online. And again, this is just a quick overview of Taylor and Francis. One of the other items I forgot to put in here is that our acceptance rate hovers around 9 to 12%. I think this past year it was about 12%. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Ed. Okay. Joe, you're online. Engineering Management Review.
I'm the current editor-in-chief of Engineering Management Review, IEEE Engineering Management Review, not to be confused with the transactions. We have very different scopes and missions where our focus is primarily on reaching the practitioner, and primarily the practitioner. So any articles that we would publish, managers, technologists, organizations would need to find useful and insightful for their practice. And so we're the flagship practice journal for the TEMSCON Society, which is the society that's organizing this conference as well. I'm sorry, the TEMS, IEEE TEMS, the Technology Engineering Management Society. TEMSCON is the conference. Our structure is that we have a series of associate editors, about a dozen associate editors. We keep growing as the journal grows. And the reason why I mentioned the journal grows, although we are over 45 years old, 47 years, most of those years we were a reprint journal, and the editor's purpose reprint. The purpose of the editor was to find articles to reprint. But since about 2011 and 12, there was a change in the strategy to become more original contributions. And in 2017, we finally agreed that we would go to all original contributions. So in the last 3 years, we have only been publishing original contributions and not reprints. And the type of articles that we would publish would not be necessarily research-oriented, although a lot of them require some research evidence, and it is very practically oriented. Most articles are in the 2,000 to 4,000 word range. There's larger articles. The larger articles would probably go under review and be more similar to research articles or very in-depth case studies with very practical results. And the situation right now is that we have when we went to original contributions, of course, we had to find articles that would be very practical, and we have a review team, the associate editorial team, this mixed editorial team, including practitioners as well as academics. And in this case, what we need to do is balance the practitioner presentation with and needs with the academic rigor in some of the articles. It's a difficult balance to manage. The types of articles we'll take, we have technology notebook management articles. And in that case, those articles are very short and typically written by practitioners, managers who are out in the work world and want to share their experiences. And these are between 1,000 and about 2,000 words, relatively short articles with very focused practical advice. We have longer articles, 2,000 to 4 words, or I'm sorry, short, what we call short articles, that are less focused on the rigor and the referencing, but more focused on the practical managerial lessons from an issue. And we also invite some scholars who have in-depth research papers, like in the transactions, to submit something that is more practically oriented. For example, what does their research really mean? In most research articles, they put it down at the managerial implications as the last section in a journal. And the way that I say is we flip it the other way. we want 90% of the article to be all about the practical implications, the lessons learned, what managers need to take away from this. The methodology and all these other theoretical aspects do not need to have a focus. So it's a very practical journal. The best example that we use is like the Harvard Business Review or the Sloan Management Review, where very few references are used, and the idea is to provide very practical, easy to understand presentation. The journal's acceptance rate right now is about 30% or so, but it's gotten lower and lower, which means that we have a lot more submissions and a lot less room. But the interest has been very high. We've gone from, I would say, 30,000 downloads a year to over 100,000 this year in the last 3 years. So we've tripled the number of downloads. And we look forward to talking and answering questions as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. So as the host of the panel, I'll go last. So I'm going to now switch to Tao with the Journal of Forecasting. Tao?
Hey, everyone. This is Tao Hong. So I'm one of the directors of the International Institute of Forecasters. I'm a faculty member at University of North Carolina, Charlotte. The International Institute of Forecasters published a journal called the International Journal of Forecasting. The journal is more than 30 years old, the leading journal in this field. Right now, we just named a new editor-in-chief, whose name is Pierre Pinson, an engineer from Denmark. So the journal really, the aim is to bridge the theory and practice. So comparing with the traditional statistics and the econometrics journals, International Journal of Forecasting put more emphasis on practical things, practical methodological breakthroughs and practical insights in forecasting. And we also have another journal called Foresight, the applied journal of forecasting. So that's specific to practitioners. So this one, IJF, International Journal of Forecasting, is sort of somewhere in between. So between the pure theory and between the pure practice. The acceptance rate is around 10%. So the reason I say that is there are special issues who had acceptance rates higher than 10%, but the regular paper is mostly less than 10% acceptance rates. The papers, the selection process is very rigorous. We have one editor-in-chief who handles the first round of screening. The EIC will basically screen out probably 30 to 40% of the papers, and then it's getting passed to a handling editor. So we have 5 handling editors. The editorial board is evolving as well. So typically we have 5 to 6 handling editors, and then the handling editors take another round of screening, and then it will be passed to an associate editor. The associate editor take another round of screening, and then only the very best papers are going to be passed on to reviewers. Typically, we have 2 reviewers for each paper. Think about it. It's one through EIC, handling editor, and AE. So it's already 3 people reading the papers, and then it will be passed on to, on average, 2 reviewers. Typically, reviewers are very constructive. So myself, I submit papers to many places. So I consider this IJF is definitely one of the best journals that help me improve the quality of my own paper. And as an editor, I can see that the author's paper get the quality of the other authors' paper get improved as well through this review process, and it's very fast because everyone before sending the paper to reviewers has the right of death rejection. So you don't have to wait for months and months for the reviews to come back. So you basically within a month, your paper is rejected or not. Okay. So the journal's impact factor is growing every year. I think recently it's 3, 4 or something. It's growing every year. The reach is very broad. It's being read worldwide. The new EIC is taking some new initiatives about data, to encourage reproducibility of the forecasting methods. So if you have top quality original forecasting papers, you're more than welcome to send them to IJF, International Journal of Forecasting. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Tao. And Dr. Hong is also one of our department editors at the transactions. All right. Next, we have International Journal of Innovation and Technology Management, and Professor Alexander Brem is online. He's also one of our department editors on the transactions. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you very much, Tugru. Hello, my name is Alexander Brem. I'm professor of innovation and entrepreneurship at the University of Stuttgart in southern Germany. Also a very nice place, so if you're around in Europe, let me know and come by a visit. I'm representing the International Journal of Innovation and Technology Management, and I took big footsteps because the editor before me was Tugru, so I was very happy to hand it to get it handed over. But it's also a big, opportunity, but also a big pressure to develop it further. But I do my best. The journal is published by World Scientific Singapore, and I would say it's a typical research journal. So we also accept papers from creativity to diffusion patterns on technological innovation. We have no page limit. That's maybe a difference to many other journals. And we also accept many different article types. So from literature review to typical research papers doing qualitative or quantitative research. What's special about it was some aspects I would like to focus on. One is that we are very international. If you look on our papers we are publishing, it's really from all over the world, from all countries. And it's also reflecting in our editorial board, where we have experts from over 20 countries. We are pretty fast, I think, in many things. So the typical time we handle papers is within a few days, 3 to 4 days. And within these days, we typically decide if the paper will be proceeded with or not. And our desk rejection rate is very high. It's at 60 to 70%. So we really try to focus on papers where we see the potential to get published. And after papers pass the screening phase, the probability of getting published is very high. So what we also focus on is this fast process of getting it out into the field. So once your paper is accepted, you get a DOI number within 2 weeks, and your paper can be read and cited, and it's pretty fast online so that people can find it and do the research about it. What we also have is 2 awards. One is the Best Paper Award. So once a year, we grant that, and a Best Reviewer Award to show recognition to the best authors, but also to the best reviewers. And for this, we ask our reviewers and editorial board members what they think was the best paper. And also when submitting a review, you can also put in a mark that you think this is a good paper, which should be in this list. It's an official journal of PICMED. So also you can see the other link to Portland, to Tugru. And yeah, we are not having a full impact factor yet. We are in the Emerging Sources Citation Index and Scopus and some others, but it's hopefully something to come soon within this year or latest next year. So we are also comparably young to the other journals, now in the 17th year of the issue. So young and aspiring, and we really hope for future success with the journal. And it's also very nice to see all the other journals here. So I think we have a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot of room for many authors all over the world who look for good outlets for their research. And I think it's great for us as a field that it gets growing even further in the future.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Joe Titt, International Journal of Innovation Management.
Okay, I can't make any adjustments. I'll just check.
Okay.
You guys are really loud. I don't quite know what's happening. No, I'm sure the International Society for Professional Innovation Management, and one of the characteristics of the journal and also the history is it tries to bring together academics, practitioners, and consultants. And I think both the journal and the association have been quite successful in doing that. The focus is less on technology and R&D or even product development, because those 3 areas by existing journals, particularly technology and R&D. So the focus is more broadly on innovation, things like process innovation, this one making, service innovation, these sort of areas which aren't terribly well served by others that focus on technology, R&D, or product development. We are attracting mostly various associations, maybe SCOTUS, and into SCOTUS, our site score is around about 2, and improving. And we're sort of mid-range in the field, depending on how you define the field. But broadly defined, we're about mid-range. We're ranked 50th out of 192 journals. Most recently, we had 8 issues per year. We don't currently plan to increase that. That's about capacity at the moment in terms of paper throughput. And we need to do round about 10 to 12 papers are published in this issue. So we can do the arithmetic. First reviews are typically supposed to be 4 to 6 weeks, but in practice they're 8 to 10 weeks after a reminder or 2. And the gross acceptance rate, excluding special reviews, is around 1 in 3. That's really a sort of overview of sort of scope and sort of shape of the journal. I think it's sort of positioned slightly differently to most of the things we discussed, which are more about engineering management or more ops management, and later on we've got some on product development and R&D management. So I think there's space for all of these things that we're discussing today. And I guess one of the lessons that we may discuss later on is to be careful about how you position the paper when you submit, because otherwise you're going to get a desperate debt sooner or later. Like anywhere.
Okay, thank you, Joe. It was the audio was a bit low, but I think we got the gist of it. Thank you so much. So now I'm going to go to next Journal of Engineering and Technology Management, Professor Jeremy Hall.
Well, thanks very much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, and Joe, good to see you. Joe and I actually worked together briefly. I'm the current director of the Science Policy Research Unit, University of Sussex Business School. SPRU, as many of you may know, is one of the oldest and largest centers for innovation studies and pioneered a lot of the early journals, including Research Policy, which I believe was one of the first journals in innovation management. That was founded in the 70s. I'm currently the editor-in-chief of Journal of Engineering and Technology Management, which is an international scholarly and referee journal. And our main focus is on the theory and practice of technology, innovation, and engineering management. We are an Elsevier journal, which means after your paper is accepted, you're published within the next issue. So the process after the review is relatively quick. We publish 4 issues a year. Our impact factor has been hovering around above 2 now for the last couple of years. The majority of our authors and reviewers come from business schools. And for those of you that work in business schools, you may have encountered the same problems that I've been encountering, which is the rankings game, which I find is quite difficult and is becoming problematic. And I'm not saying that on behalf of my journal, but on behalf of our discourse. I think that when other people in other departments tell you what's a good journal and what's not a good journal, then that becomes actually quite problematic. And if there's one thing I'd like to take away from these types of conferences, is that we as editors and the audiences as authors, we need to protect our discourse, and we need to emphasize the importance of our area, and it's just as valid and legitimate as other areas. And this is a problem that I've encountered throughout my career, people telling me that my journal or Research Policy or Joe's journal or Tech Forecasting and Social Change isn't as good as Journal of Finance or isn't as good as ASQ or those other journals. So that's one of the big bees in my bonnet that I like to push. The other thing I think that we need to focus on is the increasing amount of submissions that most journals are getting. Our rejection rates are probably close to 5%. And it's not so much an issue of a vast influx of high quality papers, but a sheer volume of papers that's coming from around the world. So we're going to end up with more than 500 submissions this year. And that's putting quite a burden on the review process. And for those of you that have submitted to my journal, Some of you may have encountered a long period of time to get the reviews processed. My sincere apologies for that. It's simply to do with the sheer volume of papers that are coming in, and we are very strict in terms of trying to maintain a high level of quality, which unfortunately may result in longer reviews than what we would actually like. So again, as part of our discourse, as our research community, you know, we need to protect our discourse, and we also need to actively participate in the review process. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you. Next, we have Journal of Product and Innovation Management. Charles Noble is online. Go ahead, Charles.
Hello. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for the time. I was really hoping to be at this conference in person for the first time, so it's disappointing that we can't all get together, but I'm glad we're doing this. If you're not familiar with the Journal of Product Innovation Management, JPM, I'm just going to tell you kind of some basic things about us. I'm the co-editor-in-chief. My colleague is Jelena Spaniol, who is at Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, and we have been at this about 1.5 years now. JPM is a Wiley journal, and so we have a lot of resources behind us because of that, which is really helpful in terms of getting you know, publicity for articles and things like that, and it helps the process. I think we have a pretty smooth process, although I'm sure every editor online here has had to fight the same battles in terms of getting good reviewers and getting things done on time and all that, but I think we have a pretty good infrastructure. We publish 6 issues a year. Our mission at JPM is really to publish articles on a wide spectrum of innovation and product development management issues. We define that pretty broadly, so we include you know, services issues at times, some things that have more of an engineering flavor at times. We're starting to get a few more of those, I think, which is interesting. A wide range of methodologies. We're very open to lots of things. I think historically we published a lot of qualitative work, and we still do, but I think more and more we're shifting to a broader range of quantitative approaches, including some things that are just about what I would consider modeling papers. So I think that's good. We want a range of perspectives, and really it's all about matching the right method to the right topic, and so we focus on that. A little bit of history. The journal's been around for a good while. It was founded in 1984 in the basement of a guy named Tom Hustad, who saw a need for this journal, and we're indebted to him for all the hard work that he did over the years. We are affiliated or owned, I guess, by the PDMA, Product Development and Management Association, which is mostly a practitioner organization at this point, but we're always trying to leverage the synergies that we have between, you know, our more academic side and that more practitioner side, and that's been really useful and neat. We do a lot of things at joint conferences, combining these different kinds of groups, and I think that's really helped us distinguish the journal from some other more straight academic ones that are out there. You know, we're open to all kinds of contexts and subjects, like I said, methodologies. We're very international. I think over the years, the bulk of our submissions were coming from the U.S., and in recent years, it's you know, less than half, quite a bit less than half actually, which is good. We're happy about that. You know, we are getting a lot more papers to the prior point. You know, usually more papers is a good thing. We're getting about 550 papers a year. We are getting a lot of papers from developing parts of the world and developing scholars. And so, you know, we do have a lot of sifting to find the gems in there. You know, our acceptance rate right now is in the 5 to 7% range. You know, the journal is impactful. Our 3-year impact factors just under 4. Our 5 years just under 6. So that's good. In terms of just trying to get to those good papers, you know, we have a desk rejection rate that's pretty high, unfortunately. I don't know how aggressively you all, you know, handle that part of the process, but, you know, we try to preserve our reviewers for the best stuff because they are a precious resource. So our desk rejection rate is about 55% right now. So Jelena and I aren't making a lot of friends around the world, but we're doing our best for the journal, and we are getting some really good papers. We do tend to show up as a cross-disciplinary journal in a lot of rankings in different areas, you know, mostly in business, management, marketing, areas like that, but also in some engineering rankings and other places. So I guess we're tier 4 in the UK and other kind of similar rankings. So we're happy about that. Always trying to push that. The way we're structured, kind of real briefly, is we have 16 associate editors. Yellen and I handle a first review of papers, decide whether they should go to reviewers or not. If they show promise after that, they get assigned to an associate editor. And we really want them to be very hands-on and nurture these things and develop them. And it's a very prestigious group. We do a lot historically with special issues, and we've used those to really shape the direction of the journal. Some of the ones that are active right now cover topics like social innovation, digital transformation, design thinking, the human side of innovation, and then something on digital manufacturing, which this group might be interested in. And so if you would go to our website, you can find all kinds of detail on those things. So I guess that's about it. One of the things I want to make sure I emphasize is, not only are we international, but we really encourage diversity of fields submitting to our journal. So we're really anxious to encourage papers from an engineering perspective, from different kinds of perspectives that are out there. So I hope that we can make some new friends and connections through this conference here. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And next we have Journal of Management in Engineering, Young.
Thank you. So this is a interesting journal. It is called Journal of Management in Engineering. And this is published by the American Society of Civil Engineers. So this has ASCE is the longest and oldest professional society in the U.S. And among the 36 journals that ASCE publishes, this is probably the only journal that has engineering management component. Started in '85, now it's a bi-monthly journal. We have been actively utilizing the social media recently, so Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and even for the Chinese audience, WeChat. So we try to announce new papers and all that. I have been taken over as editor-in-chief in 2016. Before that, I was an associate editor. We have 8 associate editors and about 20 editor board members, and way over 1,000 reviewers reviewing the papers. As others mentioned earlier, it's unfortunately these days academia, it's all about the ranking game. Even though I am in the business school, this is published by the ASCE. So from the civil engineering side, it's fine. But this journal has, in a way, a sector interest, which engineering management in the engineering, construction, infrastructure, built environment flavor has to be included to be considered. So considering that, our impact factor has been about 3.3 last year. And then luckily, even though it's in the engineering field, our journals are also listed in different rankings. Okay, we can either play the game or not play the game, but if it's ranked, then let's try to make the most use out of it. So in the ABS list or in the Australian list, we are ranked as 2 from 1 to 4. From the quartile point of view, we are in the quartile 1 for civil and quartile 2 for industrial engineering. And Scopus now has their own ranking, and we are doing very well on that as well. So we are trying to do our best. Last year, we received 580 papers. The acceptance rate is about 13% last year. As others mentioned, it's all about speed and quality these days. So we try to keep the goal of submission to first decision in about a month, and then submission to final decision in about 5 months. This is the ASCE internal data. And we allow up to 2 revisions. And after the second review, if there are still a lot of questions and comments and negative feedback, then we at that point reject our paper. So the average time for submission to first decision I try to keep it within a week or less, so that, like others said, that they will not hear the rejections in 2-3 months in one-line rejection, but they rather find it right away, so they can find other outlets if needed. USA is still the largest contributors, but China, Australia, South Korea, Canada, England, Taiwan, so they're authors from all around the world, and the contributing organizations are also very diverse, not just in the U.S., but all over the world. We actually publish all kinds of types of papers, a survey type, which is a state-of-the-art review, a practitioner-oriented, which could be classified as a forum. Also, the typical technical papers has to have a good theory reading, a contribution to the body of knowledge, case studies. So we try to accept all different kind of papers. Since I took over as editor-in-chief, there has been about 10 special issues that have been either completed or ongoing, including, so these are all, again, in that particular domain, which is the built, in a very broad sense, built environment domain, supply chain, organization and behavior and governance, smart cities, resilience in the civil structures, data-rich eras, diversity and inclusions, and as recently as COVID-19, the pre and post-COVID-19 impact toward this built environment world. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Yang. Also, Dr. Kwak is one of our department editors at the Transactions. Thanks for your work there too. Okay, next we have MIS Quarterly. Professor Ravi Ravichandran is going to talk about that. Ravi? And Professor Ravichandran has also been a long time department editor of Transactions.
That's right. Thurul, thanks very much for organizing this. It would have been great if the conference was held and we could have all met in person, but this at least gives an opportunity for all of us to at least see each other and talk to each other. And this is an important conversation, certainly. I am a professor here at RPI in the Lally School of Management. My primary research focus has been in information systems. I'm also an associate dean for research here in the school. So I'm representing now MIS Quarterly, and as Tugul mentioned, I've also been associated with IEEE TEM for a long time as a department editor, and before that on the editorial board. So MIS Quarterly is a journal, an academic journal that is largely focused on research that is aimed at understanding digitization and its impacts in all its forms. And a variety of issues are of interest to the journal, all the way from development of IT products and services to its use and how organizations are managing IT resources, and the impact of IT at all levels, individual level, group level, organizational level, societal level, and research that spans from design issues with respect to technology to behavioral issues in terms of how individuals adopt and use it, to also strategic and managerial issues related to the use of IT in organizations. The submissions are come from all over the world. There is quite a bit of interest in the journal and across the world, and we get submissions from all the continents. To a lesser extent from Latin America, but to a great extent from Asia, of course, US and Europe and Australia as well. The editorial structure is two-tiered in the sense that we have a set of senior editors who handle the manuscript in collaboration with associate editors. We have around 20 senior editors and around 40 associate editors. And the decision process is somewhat decentralized. The senior editors handle the manuscript, and the associate editors initiate the review process. we typically get around 2 or 3 reviewers who are experts in the domain to assess the paper. And the time frame we try to target is to get to first decision for 90% of the manuscripts within 60 days, which is a reasonable target for a research journal where the review process often tends to be fairly intense. The journal has a vision which we call a trifecta, which is impact, range, and speed. Speed being how quickly we can actually make decisions on the manuscript and get back to the author so that we can get from submission to publications quickly. Impact focuses on both a scholarly impact. It's primarily a research journal, and the focus is to create scholarly impact, as well as impact on the business practice, which is always a challenge for academic journals because of the time cycle involved in publication, and then of course we write in a language that typically academics understand. So in order to kind of translate that into practical impact, we need to take some steps, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that are underway here. On range and digitization today has wide implications all the way from a policy to individual level behaviors, including design issues. So the journal focuses on a wide variety of papers and is open to accepting a variety of papers. And the editorial board is structured so that it allows for handling this variety that is typical in the field as well. The journal is considered a top-tier journal, one of the top 2 journals in information systems discipline, but we also get submissions from other disciplines quite regularly, listed in all the right lists in FT50 and UT Dallas list and a number of other lists. It has a good impact factor. The 5-year impact factor is 9.61, and it has been continuing to grow. I don't have at the top of my head what the acceptance rates are. The journal itself doesn't have a target acceptance rate, but the review process is highly developmental in nature. It puts a lot of stress on us as editors because even the rejected papers get a fair amount of feedback in the review process. But the acceptance rate is very comparable to most top-tier journals, which hovers maybe around 8 to 10%, which is the typical range. But there isn't any target acceptance rate that we have. Any good paper that is worth publishing, there's an effort made to help the authors polish it. In fact, one of the editors, previous editors, called it, finding the diamond in the rough, and that's typically how the editorial process is structured. And we try hard to do that. But because of the submission rates going up, the number of submissions that we get, in general, the acceptance rate hovers around 10 to 11%. To kind of increase the impact, the journal has established some partnership with complementary channels. The idea being to be able to take the academically rigorous and theoretically rich articles that are published in the journal and try to translate them into outlets that are much more practice focused, so that the message in those papers can actually be made accessible to managers and practitioners quite quickly. So we have this partnership with the Sloan Management Review, Management and Business Review, and we also have partnership with the NPR, where there is an active effort to take the papers and feed it through these outlets and explore the interest in those outlets. And then if there is an interest, try to actively convert them into publishable pieces in those. Sometimes it could be a short piece, sometimes it could be just a commentary, whatever may be the right form. There is an effort made by the journal to actually push the publications into these outlets so that there's more visibility. Here is just a few examples of papers that have appeared in the quarterly, which kind of have been translated into Sloan Management Review publications, and trying to kind of accelerate the reach of these articles to the practitioner audience. The journal also has something called a curation effort, where there has been publications in specific areas that occurred over time. For example, if you take cybersecurity, is a good example. There's a lot of work that's been published in the quarterly on this particular area from various different perspectives, all the way from design issues to behavior issues to whatever else. So this curation effort is one to kind of pull all of these together, create more or less a overarching framework that makes it accessible to approach this landscape of research that's been done in a particular domain and make it available for authors to see. So it's almost like a very elaborate summary of the literature, but curated in a very effective way and easily accessible way. And so this curation effort is led by a senior editor and an editorial team that pulls all this together and develops the framework to present all the research and then make it available to everybody. So this is a very useful exercise in the sense that it kind of gives a nice access point for any themes where there has been an accumulation of research and knowledge in the journal. You can go to the journal website to kind of look at the various themes on which this curation effort has been done so far. There is also a partnership with AIS. AIS is the Association for Information Systems, Transactions on Replication Research. The effort here is to make possible replication of research, and this is becoming common. I think many of the science journals insist on it, where the data used in the papers are made available, and others can replicate and comment on how the results hold. So the same is being attempted here, where the authors make available the data that they use, and there is a replication of the analysis and findings, so that there is cumulative research that can be built on what that is published in the quarterly. There is a number of author resources that the journal makes available. There are author workshops and reviewer development workshops that are very regularly held in the major conferences, and the resources in terms of how to access the journal, what it looks for in terms of submissions, and how to navigate the review process, and all of those details are available on the journal's website. So are the guidelines for what it takes to be an effective reviewer for the journal. So let me stop here, and if there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
So thank you, Ravi, for introduction to MIS Quarterly. Is James Euchner online?
Yes, I am.
Hi, James.
Hi, how are you?
So Research and Technology Management, it's all yours. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for including us. I'm Jim Euchner, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Research Technology Management. I have been for about 10 years. I am different from many on the call in that I'm not a professor or an academic. I've spent 30 years in innovation and R&D and IT and strategy management in major corporations, so Verizon, Goodyear, and Pitney Bowes. And that's, I guess, part of what's gotten me interested over time in research technology management as a journal. It's the publication of IRI, which is now the Innovation Research Interchange. It used to be known as the Industrial Research Institute. RTM itself has been published since 1958, so it's third volume, and it's still published as print as well as online. It's published 6 times a year, and focuses on the practitioner and on bringing best practices, next practices in research management, innovation management, technology, management of technical resources, and so forth. A lot in the journal is around topics that help people do that. So open innovation, stage gate, agile development methods, business model innovation, global R&D, design, those types of things. It's written specifically for practitioners, and we seek to make it accessible to practitioners. We're on the other hand, about half of our contributions are from academics who work with businesses and conduct their studies with businesses. So we sort of stand at that intersection. Our specialty is introducing new practices to our audience. So the early open innovation stuff by Chesbrough was published there. The early stage gate stuff by Cooper was published there. Some of Gene O'Connor's work on breakthrough innovation and so forth. The authors are both practitioners and researchers, but so it's a balance. Every year we do give an award for the best paper called the Holland Award. As with, which I think is a fairly prestigious award. Other people have talked about the difficulty or the challenge of ratings, and we also face that, but to some extent, we've just decided that that's not our aim. We know our impact factor, but the kinds of things that get you a higher impact factor are more related to academic journals and references to academic authors as well. And we're primarily interested in serving our audience. So we have an impact factor a little over 1. And it would be nice to have it increase, but it's not our main objective. We have an acceptance rate of about 20%. Our readers are mostly industry, although academics who are interested in practices inside industry are readers as well. We go through a double-blind peer review process, and let's see if there's the kinds of things we publish are new practices, useful models or frameworks, but they may be the study from a single case, an implementation, sort of warts and all, what went wrong, which did not, that we might call managers at work. We do studies of a practice implemented across companies to understand their viability and validity and limits. We publish when people propose new tools or frameworks, but really they have to be supported by some sort of practical application. So we're looking for new things supported by some credible evidence, but it probably will not have the academic rigor that's required in some of the other journals that are on this call today. Again, our goal is to try to get these practices to the people who might use them as soon as we can. They won't do it if there's not some credible reference, but it may not yet have reached the stage where it's been fully vetted or demonstrated quantitatively. So that's a basic overview of research technology management. It's published 6 times a year, and any questions we'll take later, I think. You're on mute again, just so you know.
Yes, thank you so much, James. Thank you. All right, next we have Technology Analysis and Strategic Management by Dr. James Fleck. James, you're on now.
Hello, Tugo. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I guess you're all spread around the world. Thank you, Tugo, for this invitation to this group. It's been very interesting so far. I'd like to, well, I'm Editor-in-Chief of Technology Analysis and Strategic Management, and I would recommend all of those who want to find out more to visit the homepage. It's a Taylor and Francis journal, and it's well equipped with examples of papers, details of downloads, etc., details about publication, details about getting access to open access, etc. I'm a professor of technology development, innovation, and enterprise at the University of Edinburgh in the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group, which incidentally I founded in year 2000. I'm delighted to have taken over as editor of TASM, as we like to call it, from my teacher, Harry Rothman, who founded this 30 years ago. So it's quite a well-established journal.
I think rather than going through in detail, I'd just like to highlight some of these points. You can, as this has been recorded, if you're interested, you can go over them again. TEMSCON is a very international and interdisciplinary journal. I think compared with some of the ones we've heard, it's very interdisciplinary, and we tend to focus on trying to encourage new approaches that are interdisciplinary to come through. We serve various communities ranging from business, engineering, economics, and I would also emphasize social studies of science and innovation, which often provides quite a distinctive theoretical perspective. Its focus is, of course, on innovation and technology development in the strategic context. And it's not a pure strategy journal. Indeed, it's not a pure any disciplinary journal. And one of the main reasons for desk rejects, in fact, are when I judge that a paper is within one rather narrow specialist field. We're more interested in papers that cover several different perspectives. We've recently moved to 12 issues a year. I'm not quite sure what our rejection rate is because it's quite difficult to calculate. Desk reject is going up because we're now attracting more than 500 submissions a year, and we try to take a development approach to that. So I try to advise a more specialist journal if it's not appropriate, etc. We are open to novel and non-conventional approaches, and special issues have been important. And interestingly, Taylor and Francis will select several certain special issues and publish books from them, which of course attract a completely different audience. Here are some of the examples of special issues. We've got a couple that are in the pipeline. In fact, we're full up at the moment. I don't like to do any more than at most 2 a year from experience. It tends to push on and disrupt the regular submissions, which I'd like to continue to encourage the flow through. There've been a few comments about ratings, and I would, Jeremy and James or Jim commented, and I would agree with that. For me, what's important is not the journal. This is just a vehicle, a channel. What is really important is the quality of the papers. And we have in the past had some very highly cited papers, as well as because of our interdisciplinary and, if you like, accommodating approach, papers that are there in the record, but are not necessarily highly looked at. So I think that, and precisely because I think in Britain, the management organization has got a grip, unfortunate grip on ratings, and that precludes interdisciplinarity, unfortunately. And I think that's something that this field, above all, does require. So I'd like to, for those of you who are not editors, who are looking for actual publishing, here are my top 10 tips. How identify a clear focus. Let me pick some of them. Keywords is a very useful one. Look at the journal's keywords rather than just what you think are relevant, because that certainly helps in identifying appropriate reviews and therefore the speed of the review process. We're having an increasing problem with similarity of already published research. We now have to check, because we've run into some sticky patches there, and I'd recommend that people look at the COPE website, the Committee on Publication Ethics. It gives guidance for how to appropriately cite previous work. For those international authors, in particular, English language editing is important, as it is, as I discovered, even for the Brits. And I have my own English corrected from time to time. I'd like to emphasize for this journal that it's a substance of the ideas that's important. Methodology is merely a means to that end. Quite a few papers tend to celebrate and make a meal out of the methodology rather than focusing on the substance of what's found. For those who are new to publication, we try to encourage reviewers to give constructive but critical reviews that can help authors improve their papers. And I think it's therefore worthwhile responding fully and politely to reviewer comments. And indeed, I would further recommend that authors volunteered as a reviewer in order to perceive how the review process works and to understand where reviewers are coming from. Quite a few colleagues have mentioned the speed of publication. That's not something that I've been particularly concerned about, because I think the good papers will be there for quite a while. When I've looked at the career of a paper, really good papers, what I call classics, take some 5 years before they're recognized as such. Recency is not, I think, a particular value for this journal. It's rather more the substance and solidity and the long-livedness of papers that is important. And we've got quite a few that have been around for quite a long time, especially in the multi-level perspectives, strategic niche management field. So my final point would be, have patience. We do depend on the voluntary efforts and the goodwill of reviewers. Therefore, don't be too impatient about being published speedily. Look for something that is worth being published. So if I'd be very welcome any further questions if people want to get in touch for further details about the journal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, James. The list of do's was very, very useful. Thank you. All right. Next, we have technological forecasting and social change. Dr. Fred Phillips.
Well, so good to see all my colleagues here by video. I think their recording of the session is going to be immensely valuable, and I look forward to it. And I want to extend congratulations and sympathies to the new editors. And thanks to Professor Fleck, who basically gave my presentation for me. I completely agree with the statements about research ethics and about giving us papers that say something substantial about technology management and do not simply present us with methodological virtuosity. Well, technological forecasting and social change is Elsevier's Journal of Technology Assessment and Forecasting. It's 50 years old this year. Impact factor is in excess of 3.8. And we get about 1.7 million articles downloaded per year. The overwhelming fact of our existence at this moment is the increasing number of manuscript submissions. Last year we got 2,400. Expect this year, so many implications. How we have to is that we used to publish papers that are generally about technology management rather than specifically about technology assessment and forecasting. And though we still do to some extent, the fact that our acceptance rate is around 11%, and we get increasing numbers of papers every year, it means that we have to take a tighter focus as regards the scope of the journal. A great many papers are desk rejected because, as some of the editors on the panel have said, is that the reviewers are the scarce resource. Many submissions from new researchers who know how to write a paper more or less, but not yet qualified to be a reviewer. So this puts the squeeze on the reviewing resource, and we rely on desk rejection, and desk rejections occur for a variety of reasons. So we can only publish a certain number of pages per year, and with the increasing number of submissions and the acceptance rate being what it is, this means a lot to authors and how authors must present their work if they hope to have it published in PFSC. One very important tip for authors is to be concise when you're writing. Don't never say blah, blah, blah when blah is suffice. Because if you say blah, 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 you are robbing other authors of the opportunity to occupy.
Fred, your voice is a bit muffled, so.
Okay, I'll try to be closer.
Yeah.
Okay, so authors must make their title and abstract absolutely to the point, because the decision has to be very quick on our part, whether to just reject or whether to forward the paper on to an associate editor, who may also just reject, but may choose to forward it to reviewers, and invite reviewers for the paper. So title and abstract must be very much the point, must be grammatical, because grammar mistakes in the title is a very strong indication that there are going to be many more grammar mistakes in the body of the paper. And because we want our journal and expect it to be read by policymakers as well as academics, the language has to be very clear and jargon minimized. So you pay attention to the topic, the title, the abstract, the methodology, the prose. As for the topic, I don't have time to go into great detail here, but please do read the guide for authors on the journal's website. Methodology, I also will not comment on right now, but you have to show that your topic does fit the research stream of technological forecasting and social change. And as for the prose, the language that you use in the body of the paper, it must be good English, it must be concise, keep jargon to a minimum, as I say. Avoid redundancies. I actually saw someone the other day use the phrase predictive forecasting. Okay. So on other aspects, I started to get some messages from authors that say, I submitted my paper 3 weeks ago and I haven't got a response. And I think 3 weeks, this is too much to expect, especially in the time of COVID, because our reviewers are trying to work from home, distracted by poor home internet connections and distractions from their children, and trying to work their courses to online because the universities are not having face-to-face classes. So reviewers are busier, and I am afraid that in
all right. We had some difficulties at times, might be because of the microphone, maybe. But thank you. Now, next we have Technology and Society, Charlotte Griffey-Brown. Hi, Charlotte.
Hello. I would be so grateful if I could share the screen. I'm really excited to see everybody today. I'm disappointed we couldn't be together in person as we were last year, but I'm so grateful that everyone is doing well. I'm really, really excited to see you. So I just have a few words to say about technology and society, particularly since Professor Phillips and Professor Fleck so wonderfully went through many of the points I was going to make. So I'm going to just focus on how technology and society is different Primarily, as an interdisciplinary journal, we aim to provide scholarship that enables decision makers to really be thoughtful about decisions that shape the intersection of technological change and the transformation of the world around us. So in terms of interdisciplinary work, we welcome theoretical and scholarly approaches around history and philosophy of science and technology, certainly technology forecasting and economic growth, but also, and the typical engineering and technology management, but policy and ethics. And the distinguishing factor has to be the discourse of what this means within the context of technology and society and socio-technical frameworks. So we get a lot of manuscripts which we channel to different journals because they don't really fit into that approach. We do welcome applied approaches because we are focused on helping decision makers make better decisions. However, again, it must be situated within the context of socio-technical frameworks. What does this mean at this intersection of technology in society and the dynamics therein? So we do take some approaches from a developmental perspective, but ultimately it has to be situated within a context of the differentiated focus on social forces that influence technological decisions and the choices that are open to society with respect to technology issues. We have upward of 600. This year we'll have well over 1,000 submissions a year. Our impact factor hovers around 15 to 20%. Actually, this year it's going to be much, much lower because of the surge in submissions. We have about 500,000 plus downloads per year, and our impact factor is 1.9 to 2%. Just to give you some context, in 2016 we had 157 submissions. We had an impact factor that was slightly less than 1%, and our downloads were 238,101. So we've seen significant growth in all areas of, I think, what was referred to as impact range and speed. Speed has been a significantly, as Professor Phillips was saying, speed right now is just entirely problematic, not only because of the surge, but because most importantly, reviewers are heavily impacted by the situation that we all find ourselves in. So what we have done to address some of this is we have tried to reframe what we are looking for in the journal. And before I talk about that, just wanted to briefly mention, as several of you have, almost all of you have, what to do. We really are checking for some very specific things that will help authors get past that desk reject stage. We have a huge number of desk rejects. I would say 60 to 70% at this point. And sometimes it's easier for those of you looking to publish to see what not to do. One of the biggest things is, just not focusing and looking at the journal that you're publishing in and connecting with that discourse. It's really important to understand how journals are different and connect to the discourse that's there. But of course, these are the other things that we find incredibly problematic that you can see in terms of content and writing. And then, of course, the things you've already mentioned with respect to, just doing research well and having something that's substantive, that's clear, and that has a tremendous potential to impact the way that we are able to make decisions in this world that are about technology. And so I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen. And what I thought I would do is just tell you a little bit about the reframing. We had an editorial board meeting, and we realized that given this surge in submissions, we really wanted to become more specific and highlight new themes rather than getting trapped in this cycle of I would say, the tyranny of incrementalism. We really wanted to suggest new themes and larger questions within the scope of this discourse for authors to consider. And within that, we defined, the influence of biology on these interactions within technology and society, given the situation we find ourselves in. So we wanted to broaden perspectives for new research and technologies that are situated in biosocial systems, which have a wide variety of cultural, philosophical, political, and economic dimensions, because that's the context in which we play. And so we provided authors within this, several new research themes to consider, and we asked researchers to consider several open questions and to really think about the major perspectives of technology in society, which range from technology determinism to the social shaping of technology to technology domestication. In other words, what are the dynamics moving from technology as this kind of irresistible force in shaping society to individuals shaping technologies? And this one theme we were hoping that collectively we can add to our discourse and consider is how technology and society is mediated by the influence of biology from the perspectives of irresistible determinism and large-scale shaping and domestication of individuals and things like that. So we presented some questions. How do theories of paradox and ambidexterity help us to understand and create a future worth wanting? Can biosocial technical systems help fill in the gaps in asymmetrical development? We kind of presented this broadened framework as well as specific guidance on what a manuscript should include in order to not be desk rejected. And we were very, very specific in terms of the characteristics and their connection to the discourse in technology and society. We're so thankful to be a part of this panel and to see all of you again. I am grateful that I have two wonderful associate editors and have had the privilege of working with Tugral on further developing technology and society when he was on our editorial staff, and we miss him. But Marina Davic and Stephen Foster are associate editors, and we're expanding the team later in the year. And of course, we have a whole system and framework, as you've all mentioned, of those who on our editorial board handle editorial responsibilities within specific departments. So thank you so much, Tuva, for arranging this, and I'm so delighted to see everyone is safe and healthy. And kudos to Jeremy and Fred and James for mentioning, the issues that we're all facing. I'm at the Pepperdine Graziadio School of Business, and we face the same issues with respect to rankings, and I believe that this is a conversation that we should have collectively as scholars and those who would like to create a future worth wanting, and certainly the open public discourse is an essential part of that. So I wholeheartedly agree, and thank you for raising those issues.
Thank you so much, Charla. Thank you. It was nice having you. All right, next we have Technovation, and Stalvia Matos. Dr. Matos will represent the journal as co-editor-in-chief. Stalvia?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. So I'm a faculty member of the Surrey Business School, and I'm the head of the Center for Future Innovation Management. I'm here representing Technovation, and our remit is to advance technology and innovation management know-how. So we are definitely very interdisciplinary, and we include, all facets of technological innovation and consider the perspective of process and product, social innovation, also conceptualization of a new technology-based product or process through commercialization. So we look for contributions to both theory and practice in a number of different topics. That includes technological trends, management of technology-intense entrepreneurial ventures, organizational structures and how this affects technological management, and information field. There's a lot more information in our website too. So our impact factor is quite healthy. It's 5.25, the most recent one. And as you probably know, my colleague Vin Haverbeck and I took over the editorship of Technovation just last January. And since then, we've been focusing on making sure that we can continue the excellent work that our previous editor-in-chief, Jonathan Linton, built over the years in terms of the reputation and the quality of Technovation. So we are paying special attention to theory and methodological rigor of the papers that are submitted to the journal. However, we are also looking forward to the future, making sure that Technovation is still a key player in the research that is being done on current and pressing issues, in terms of also identifying new trends and new insights in the field of technology and innovation management. One of the things that we are looking, for example, is we've been working on expanding and updating the topical areas and editorial board. So it's evident, for example, that digital-related innovations is a growing area and it tends to change the innovation potential of the industry. So there are also other areas that we're looking to incorporate as we're refreshing a little bit of the journal. And that includes ecosystem development and management, social innovation. So these are just a few examples of things that are growing and being very exciting, and we're trying to incorporate as a fresh side of the journal. I think that's it for now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stelvia. Now, next I will talk about IEEE transactional engineering management. So I'm very proud to have been picked as the 5th editor-in-chief about 2.5 years ago. And it's an honor for me because when I was a PhD student, my advisor was the editor-in-chief, Danda Kokaaglu, who was the 2nd editor-in-chief of this journal. I mean, I've really grown up in this field, studying this journal. As in when I was a student, I knew this journal as the top journal in the field. The field has grown, as we have seen, and it's a great thing that the field is growing. It's helping all of us, and it's also helping the industry and government as a result. The IEEE transactional engineering management has been started in the 50s, so its history is more than 60 years old. I think it's the one of the oldest, if not the oldest, journal represented here today. And the journal has been again listed in all the right places as well. When I took over, I realized that the several other journals were capturing several emerging areas, such as the impact of technologies, including artificial intelligence, blockchain, and so on and so forth. So I basically initiated special issues. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. And these special issues have helped really attracted new audience. Of course, to do that, we also invited new department editors to address those areas, as well as editorial review board members. So we currently have 20 department editors and more than 200 editorial review boards, and close to 1,000 or a little over 1,000 reviewers. from all over the world. Now, the special issues that I would like to get your attention to is really focusing on the technologies, the emerging technologies, as well as the crisis that we're living through. So one of them is focusing on how technology can build resilience to achieve a sustainable world, overcoming challenges for humanity to fight global outbreaks. So the details of the call is on the TEMS website, so you can see the details there. The other one is new perspectives on technology and innovation management to strengthen the development of healthcare organizations and ecosystems. We have seen how the healthcare organizations were stressed over the recent crisis. Also, we have seen how technology really helped to pick up the challenges, to address the challenges there. Another one is looking at impact of agri-technology, so technologies in agriculture, and they really look at Agri-Tech 4.0 on business and society. And there are several other special issues ongoing, so I just wanted to mention those. And as a result of those initiatives, we have seen our submissions go up almost 150%. So we were receiving around 450 or so many papers a year. Last year, we have received more than 1,000 papers, and we're on track to basically maintain that number this year. So all of my colleagues have mentioned, so I agree with all the suggestions on really what to do and what to expect. Like I said, we have received more than 1,000 papers last year, and we have published about 70 papers. So overall, really the acceptance rate is about around 10%. And because of this increase in submissions and interest, we have increased our page budget next year, as well as our number of issues. So first time in its history, engineering transactions on engineering management is going to be going to 6 issues a year starting 2021. And we'll also have a new cover, so you'll see it's going to be basically disclosed at the beginning of the year. So that's all I have to say for transactions. And now I'm going to open basically to questions to the audience, and we're going to get the questions through Vishwas. So Vishwas, do we have any questions yet?
No, we don't have any questions yet. Everyone, you can put in your questions on the chat window or the Q&A window. It would reach all the panelists.
All right, so while people are writing the questions, I really thank you all for coming to this panel. Although we are not together face-to-face, I don't think we could have been face-to-face with this type of group. I mean, it's really basically all the journals that I've been working with all my career are represented here today. So in a way, the crisis helped us get together, I guess. Yes.
Talluri, Andy here. Could I just jump in for a quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
A comment. I think this is very informative session, and I actually got a really quick overview of what is all the different type of publications that related to our field. So I really appreciate that. I have just one particular question for Ed Poole. He mentioned something about body of knowledge for the engineering management. I would like to know a bit more about that. If Ed or somebody can share that with me.
Yeah, we have a engineering management body of knowledge. We have the society publishes an engineering management handbook and a engineering management body of knowledge. ASEM also has a certification program for certified professional engineering managers, and that program is based off the engineering management body of knowledge. If you go to the ASEM website, you can see a link for those materials.
Is there a possibility that we could participate and collaborate?
Absolutely.
I'd be really interested in contributing to that from our societies, and maybe basis on those body of knowledge to help establish curriculums and trainings and certifications. I think that would be a very exciting initiative for us to get involved in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you send me an email after this, we can set up a time, talk with the right people.
Why don't I connect you guys myself? So I
Okay.
I have both
why
of
don't
your
you do
emails. Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's all for me.
Do we have any questions? Which was?
Yes, we do. This is from Reina. The question is, what is the most important thing? Give me one moment. What is the most important thing you look in an article to get published? What do you recommend a new researcher to get published?
Anybody?
I think I might take a quick shot at it.
Go ahead.
So for me, I think, when I receive papers, the most important thing is the introduction and the motivation. I think majority of the reviewers make their minds up about the paper by reading the motivation and the introduction. So if that is not set right, I think the probability of the paper getting rejected is very, very high. It doesn't matter what kind of sophisticated methodologies you're using, how good your data set is, right? If you're not able to anchor the problem in practice, if you're not able to demonstrate that it's an important problem to look at, then I think all bets are off, right? So that's where I would start, And the second thing is that you need to pay attention to the journal. What kind of papers journals are actually, publishing, right? You may have a fantastic idea, you may have great data set, and you have a very good story to tell, but sometimes, right, it just doesn't fit the journal. So I think before you submit a paper, it's important to look at that to see whether whatever you're doing is aligned with what the journal wants. I'll let others, address it as well. But those are my 2 cents.
Thank you so much.
I think those are very good comments. What we're looking for is something that would be useful, new to the readers, useful, and enough evidence so that it's credible enough for them to try it. But I agree with the previous comments as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
A quick comment from my side, because I also noticed with many papers I have to desk recheck, they're lacking basic standards. So the language is too bad, or the discussion is 2 lines. So even without reading the paper, you can just read by the structure that basic things are missing. So I think it's very important that you should read other articles, usually the featured ones on the website of the journal, just to get a better feeling. How should an article look like for this journal? And it's definitely a big difference if you submit it to a practitioner or more research journal. So I think then many desk rejections could be avoided, just taking note of that.
Thank you.
A lot of PhD students are required in an SCI journal in order to graduate, and they jump right in trying to do that. It's maybe too much of a hurdle. I would recommend to students that you first submit a paper to a journal that has maybe not the prestigious indexing and not a lot of submissions per year. And in that way, you can get familiar with the review process. And although you don't get graduation credit for this, it will give you the experience and some of the tools that you can then use to submit to an SCI journal. A requirement to, I know you can't change the rules of the school unilaterally, but the requirement to have a sole authored paper is rather silly in this day and age where team science is the norm and international author teams are very usual. So I know many older people who never published a sole authored paper until they were full professors. So your professor and his colleagues may be able to convince the dean that the total emphasis on sole authored papers is not appropriate.
Okay. Thank you, Fred.
I add something quickly.
Yes.
In addition to what everybody else said, which I agree with, one of the first things I do when I look at a paper is which journals they're citing. And if I don't find any of the journals that were represented by the editors here today, there's a high probability it just doesn't fit. And again, this to me is about our discourse. This is our discourse. So that's one of the first things I look at. And you'd be shocked at how many submissions I get that are completely unrelated. You know, they simply don't talk to us. They're not talking to us. And the other thing that I've noticed that's become quite common is a lot of authors spend a lot of time focusing on the theory, the introduction, the methodology, and then the discussion just sort of peters off. And typically it's our research found support for all these other papers. Or oftentimes they don't even go back to the literature that they've kind of forced us to read through, and they don't explain how they've contributed. So that's another one that just won't go through the reviews. So those are the two additional elements I would suggest. If you're submitting to a journal and you haven't cited one article from that journal, you have to really wonder why you're targeting that one. And then the other issue is, what's your contribution? If your discussion isn't solid and you spend most of your effort on your discussion, then it's probably not going to get through the reviews.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Jeremy.
If I can add to that, to Bill, absolutely. Look at the fit of the journal. The home pages of journals generally have a pretty good indication of what the scope of the journal is. And looking at the citation list is the second. I also do that. It's a very useful guide. But I think to follow on from the discussion point, a very clear statement of what the paper substantively is saying is worthwhile. So many papers in the details of the methodology or the details of where the gap in the literature is, rather than saying positively what this paper is about and why it is worthwhile.
Thank you, James. All right, we'll take another question, Vishwas.
We have one from Eduardo. Is there any suggestion on a particular subject to scholars from developing countries to focus on? Second part to it, are there particular interests from the journals to have proposals from this type of contributions?
One suggestion is that we have very little possibility of achieving the sustainable development goals at our current state of knowledge. Yet populations and environmental conditions around the world differ very markedly, and people have developed local sustainable responses to their own conditions, which may be unknown elsewhere and may be exportable elsewhere. So these kinds of contributions would be terrifically important to humanity's future. And of course, there are other things that developing countries have to contribute also, but environmental matters that have implications for the SDGs would be a very valuable thing.
This is Charla from Technology and Society. I love this question. I think that it would be critical to take a look at the new guidance. We try to put out new guidance and extending, some opportunities for new voices around the table. We've worked very, very hard at Technology and Society to pull in new voices. We noticed about 10 years ago that there were some voices we just didn't hear from. So we were very active as a board and as an editorial staff to go out and to do some developmental work to ensure that that we were hearing who we wanted to, everybody, because we have an open table. So we're very excited that we have manuscripts that are of high quality from Africa and from Latin America and from Eastern Europe and other parts of the world, and that we've diversified the portfolio. So in order to achieve that, though, I do think this is a really important question. And I encourage you to go again to those journal websites, see the new things that are happening in that discourse, and then ask some really good questions and start developing research in those areas. Doing as much reading in that journal as possible, connecting very carefully to what has been said, but opening up new questions. So I encourage you to go deep into the particular journal you're looking for, but take guidance. A lot of the editors will write editorial notes, will reframe, will move things out. Take those things to heart as they connect to your research.
Thank you so much.
Another point also to add on here, because I think it's important to mention that everybody gets rejections all the time. At least this applies to me, I guess to many of the other colleagues here. So it's not like you write the paper, you submit it, and then a few months later you're happy it gets published and cited. But it's very normal that you get rejected, and then you go to other outlets. And I think it takes a lot of effort to rewrite the paper again, then for the new journal, taking the comments into consideration you got from the earlier journal. So this is a long journey, and it's a lot of work. And yeah, you shouldn't get desperate at some point. I think that's one recommendation. And the second one is really to sign up also as a reviewer, because I think all of us, we desperately look for reviewers who are happy to take their time to give comments. And if you switch the side to be a reviewer, it's also you're the other shoes, right? So you get a better understanding of what we look for, what other reviewers look for, and I think this also helps to write papers if you do reviews. And I think all of our journals have opportunities on the website to sign up as a reviewer.
So
if I can,
please go ahead.
If I can add just one more thing, this is Joe Sarkis. If you notice, most of the editors, most of the journals, they're located in developed countries and so on. So there is a bias. I see that from I'm not a developing country, but I see the bias from a Western perspective that we have a certain methodological approach, certain expectations, certain access to resources that developing countries don't necessarily have. How do we overcome those barriers? I think those are structural barriers in the publishing game overall and in the academic circles. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know which is the situation. A lot of the schools in the developing countries want to be like the developed countries. The question is, and this is probably a broader philosophical question, is are we leading in the right way? And are we opening doors and not setting up barriers? We as editors and as publishers need to realize that the resources available to be able to do the type of research that's considered high quality and so on may not be as available. And I'm not sure how to address that point, but I think it's an important point.
Thank you, Joe. Siri, you were saying something?
Yeah, so, I'd like to address this question more from a general sense, in terms of submitting papers to journals. There needs to be a push and a pull, from the standpoint that you should look at the areas that you're really passionate about, but at the same time, what are the areas out there that are hot, So, you have to look at the intersection of the two, because I think sometimes, you may be working on a very interesting problem, and I hope there's nobody here working in job shop scheduling, so I'll throw that as an example, right? So job shop scheduling, I mean, there are like probably 1,000 algorithms, okay, to solve the job shop scheduling problem, right? So another paper in the domain of job shop scheduling, what incremental contribution can it possibly make? Okay. So I think it's important to focus on topics which are current. And one way to do that is to go to the conferences. I know this is not the time, to go to the conferences, but just look at the kind of papers that are being presented here. Invariably, you'll see clusters of maybe in healthcare, or maybe in risk management, or maybe in sustainability, right? So basically, it tells you a little bit about the trajectory of how the research in different areas is actually moving. And so you have to basically look at your interest and then couple that with what is hot out there and attack those intersection areas to have the best likelihood of getting into some of these journals. I know that I didn't answer the specific question, but it's more general in terms of selecting topics, okay, and targeting journals. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can I add a point which builds on what Joe was saying? Most of the journals are based in developed countries, and sometimes the theoretical framing often is based on phenomenon that we observe here. What we are seeing increasingly are papers that come from other parts of the world which question the theoretical framing and says that we see this phenomenon playing out differently. It's just not an empirical issue, but it also gets down to the underlying assumptions and the boundary conditions of the theory. So that's an interesting take. It's in and of itself where the underlying premise of a theory gets questioned because you're observing it in a very different setting, a very different context. And papers that interpret it and make sense out of it are great contributions actually to the discourse. And if somebody in a different setting allows you for that kind of a rich exploration that can actually change the conversation about a particular theme.
This is Charla, and I want to wholeheartedly agree that that it's having our eyes opened because there is a new optic on theory is incredibly transformative, and it's a revelation. And I think that that's where we see substantive change. So ask those deep questions about the theories. I think that is extremely helpful. And absolutely, as Joe said, there is inherent bias. We are humans. And much of our mental model is framed by what we experience and what we know, which means that that we have many, many flaws and many, many struggles. So so those good questions, particularly around theory, are heartening and help us all to advance in the ways that we need to in this world that we're in. So that's great advice.
Comment from James here. Some topics are intrinsically suitable for people from developing countries. National systems of innovation, local conditions of technology transfer, indigenous generation of innovation. For instance, in China at the moment, there's a big push on for innovation, making China as an innovation-led economy. That covers right across, and I've seen quite a few papers from Brazil, from the Middle East, from Korea, from Taiwan on those sorts of subjects. So that's one point. The other point is, when I get a paper from, if you like, outside the usual suspects, then I try to look at the reviewer pool and try to get at least one reviewer who perhaps has greater insight on that, that particular perspective. So those are two points I think that can help authors from other countries to contribute.
Thank you, James.
Can I say a few words about that, please? Regarding publications from the countries. Well, I have to say about that if I talk too much. What I think is that there's so many things that are happening in this particular context. There are interesting for the whole world to know. So, and there are many lenses that we can take up. We can extend some theory that was developed in a more privileged country and see if it still stands or sustains in a much more convoluted and complicated environment. That's super interesting too. We can add new variables and factors that were impossible to know or to see because more privileged areas are not exposed to those various. But what I've seen also in submissions from developing countries is that there is it could be more effort in terms of participating in the room of conversation. And I like to frame it as a room because if you really find something interesting to say, and then you imagine yourself in a room where you have the authors of the papers that you're citing in the literature review, and you truly see that you have something interesting to tell them, you have an interesting paper. It's very unlikely that it's going to be rejected. So I think it's a true effort in finding a good topic, finding something interesting to tell. And there are so many things going on in those countries, so many things that we need to know, but we need to communicate in a way that we are part of this room of conversation. So we do feel that we're gonna, contribute significantly to the advancement of that theory or that practice or whatever is the topic that you chose to take. So I see many publications that come from developing countries where they are too, may I say, too shy and thinking that they don't have something interesting to say when they actually do. It's just a way of communicating that in an effective way that, that it's highlighted, that the contribution is highlighted and appreciated.
Thank you so much. This is really very insightful.
Just to follow up on something Stelvia mentioned, she's actually putting together a workshop that looks at the empirical challenges of doing research in impoverished communities. So we've actually done field studies years ago in Brazil in favelas and shanty towns where they literally don't have street addresses. So we're going and conducting interviews with people that don't have phones, they don't have contact information, many of them are illiterate. So if you were to follow the typical ethics approval procedures and methodological approaches that we use to get published in typical mainstream management journals, there's no way that information could get published because it's a simply totally different environment. And I think the interesting thing is think of how much interesting insights are getting lost simply because the standards for research methods are conducted in a way that's conducive to a Western world, but they're not conducive to these poor communities. And that's what I find is perhaps one of the most interesting phenomena about doing research in developing countries. How do you get ethics approval from somebody that's illiterate? In Canada, when we worked there, you would have to sign a form. You get your candidate to sign a form. Well, we've had people that put an X on it, and we know they couldn't read the form. So, those are one of the things I think that is oftentimes underplayed in developing countries, is that we tend to ignore the realities, the gritty realities of doing research in poor communities in particular. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Jeremy. That's also very insightful. I think it's time for us to wrap up the panel. Thank you.
There is one more question. Probably this is a short one and more towards you and Andy probably. This
okay.
Is from,
okay, we'll take one last question.
Perfect. I think this will probably help us summarize and wrap the session as well. The question is, why do we not have a workshop about how to publish a paper for new authors?
That's a very good suggestion, and we generally, I've seen those in different conferences happening, and it has been suggested in other conferences too, and that's something to consider for the next conference. So we'll take that feedback.
Thank you, Tagru.
This is
yes,
Robert.
Yes, Robert.
May I add something to your answer just to that particular question? For the respective authors that have an interest, in fact, yesterday, June 3rd, IEEE provided such a workshop. If you look at the IEEE author guidelines, you will also find the ability to register for those types of workshops. So they do exist, they are online, and you can attend those.
Very good. Okay. Yes, please.
maybe Tugul, maybe it's an idea if we just put the information about the journals who presented today, like the links to each website on the IEEE TEMS website, so new authors can get easy access and see, maybe link to this video of this session as a kind of starting point, and then we can see it from there.
Excellent. So, Vishwas, I will work with you to do that. That will be very good too. Thank you for the suggestion, Alex.
Definitely, Tugul. Thank you.
And just Alex actually had initiated an editorial which will come out beginning of next year, basically how to write papers, what to pay attention to, and so on and so forth for IEEE transactions. So a few editors joined him, so it's going to come out. So that we'll also promote that when it comes out. So, dear colleagues, so thank you so much for taking time, especially during these difficult times. I know, I mean, our home turned into schools, universities, gyms, movies, restaurants. I mean, at times 4 of us are in meetings with my kids and my wife. So I understand it's not easy to make time. So you made time, and this is not just for us, but for all the attendees and for those who's going to watch this. I think this is going to help the field, the researchers, and the journals. So thank you so much. We will now pause the program, and the program will resume with the U.S. sessions at 9 a.m. Pacific, or is it 9 a.m. Or Pacific? Vishwas?
9 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern.
And 12 a.m. noon Eastern.
Tugul, can I make
Okay.
one small suggestion before we disconnect? I have not seen this many editors in our field, engineering management and technology management. If you can briefly turn on the videos and take a picture, I don't think we'll ever meet in this quantity in any conferences. Just a suggestion.
Excellent. So let me see how I can do this.
I'm doing this, Tugul. I have everyone lined up, and anybody who is not turning on the camera, if you can turn on, it'll be really helpful. I'll take a snapshot of the WebEx.
Excellent. So maybe you could send that to me too, Vishwas.
Absolutely, I'll share this.
So smile for the camera. All right.
Smile, IEEE.
All right.
Wonderful. I have a wonderful picture of all of you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope you'll join back and listen to the sessions, and we'll be seeing you in the future conferences, in the future sessions. Thank you, dear colleagues. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye now.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.